Hey, how's it going everyone? The new set is almost going to release, but I was able to get some playtesting in with some proxies that I printed to try and figure out how I want to build Max the Hype Nitro. For those of you that do follow my deck list over on Patreon, I have increased the deck size to 67. That may seem like much, but we are boosting a lot and our deck gets thinner and thinner very rapidly. So I think having a higher amount of card count in our deck in general does allow us to continue boosting a couple of turns extra without running out of gas. So I do like that, which does leave us very little space in the sideboard. Like I ended up putting some big shots in here simply for the draw my matchup, so we have some additional Phantasm blockers, and I put the Teklovossen in here. The Teklovossen might be a main deckable card because we boost a lot after all, but I don't really like paying the 2 for it, if that makes sense. But I definitely need to see if I can make space for it, because there's a lot of scenarios where we do have plenty of resources left where we will be able to play out a Teklovossen. It's still a 6 value card with like all the values split up in 3 attacks, right? So I need to see what I want to do in regards to Teklovossen. It will probably end up into the main deck somehow, but I just need to see what I want to cut out and what I want to make space for. I was originally playing around with the new legendary, what's it called again, the Hyper X3 I think it's called, and that one, whenever you banish a hyperdriver you can put it under there, and when there is a 3 or more under there, every time you put one under the hyperdriver you get to draw a card. It's a lot of card advantage, but for one it only blocks 1, and secondly there's a lot of people playing things like Command and Conquer out there, so you will not be able to play around it with the X3 card, and with the Crown Providence you can, so you can kind of cycle something away from the arsenal to stop an on-hit effect. But the main reason why I ended up cutting it for now is because I really like the synergy that cards like Gas Up. So this one says where you may put a hyperdrive from your banished zone into the arena, as well as Heist. This one says when this hits the area you may put an item with cost 0 or 1 from any banished zone into the arena under your control. Like this package right there very easily allows you to put 3 hyperdrivers onto the field. So I was kind of wondering, like, is it worth to cut this package to put the X3 back in here, or should I just continue playing with this so I can get the value of this and then still have the massive value that the Crown of Providence is able to supply to us? Of course, running the Crown of Providence means that I also had to cut stuff like the Nitro Mechanoid out of the deck, which I was running a single copy of. So I'm still wondering there what I want to do. I might end up cutting this package completely and then just running the X3 in that slot instead, because getting a free card draw once you have 3 things under there is quite valuable, and it's something that will definitely come up at least once or twice in a game. So I don't know, like the problem with it is that because you are boosting and you don't know when you're going to be boosting a hyperdriver, by the point that you do get that card draw you might not have the resources or stuff available to really utilize that card in the first place. Like you can play a playstyle where you keep your arsenal free at all times, so if you do draw into something you can easily put it into the arsenal, but I'm not sure. So the main value engine, and I think something that is going to make this somewhat viable as a hero to play, is the Banksy, because this one is a 1 cost, it's a 3 attack, and it really lines up so nicely with Max's effect itself. Because when you, let's say you go in with a 0 cost boost, right? So 3, you boost away, everything is Mechanologist in the deck, so you're gonna get that go again for sure. And then because we have plenty of blues in the deck, you pitch a blue to activate Max, you create a hyperdrive with 2 steam counters, you crank it, removing 1 steam counter, so you basically have 1 extra resource spare for the next turn, and then you throw a Banksy after that for 3 value. I think that's quite good, because now you have a resource left for the next turn, and I think it's just good value in general, and you will have a resource available for example, going for a tree with boost into anything that costs 1, like could be a Pulse Wave Harpoon, could be a Medex even, like a 1 cost 4 attack boost go again, and it allows you to give you some flexibility in how you want to block during your opponent's turn. So this deck is very good at being able to get a significant amount of value, around 7 to 8-ish value with just 2 cards in hand, like 1 boost card, 1 card to pitch, or even, for example, what you can do is you can, if you already have a Hyperdrive on the field and you have a blue in hand, then you can play a 1 cost card like a Medex for 4 would go again. You pitch a blue, the Hyperdrive you have on the field will generate a resource, so now you have 3 resources floating, and then you can just create a new Hyperdriver with Max, crank it, and still come in with the Banksy. So you have so much value with just 2 cards with this deck, and I think that's probably one of the main strengths of the deck. That's also why I kept my package in the deck quite small in terms of 2 cards and higher cards. I have a couple of in here, like the highs, because it's just a very good payoff with the Hyperdrivers and the Banish Zone, and I do have the maximum velocity for like a suddenly a surprise win con, where you just keep your whole hand when things line up and then you maximum velocity for 10. But for the most part, you're probably just going to be blocking with this. You don't want to rely your whole strategy around cards like this, and I'm quite happy with the deck. I think this is going to be quite viable simply because it is able to play both the aggro game and the mid-range game at the same time. The deck does suffer quite heavily against things like Guardian though, that force you to discard, but that's nothing new for Mechanologist in general, right? Like Mechanologist always had quite a weakness against the Guardian decks, at least the aggro variant of the deck, but I think there's definitely something in there. I think it could be quite good. We have some crankshafts in here, so this one, if it's banned from boosting, you can reload one of your Hyperdrives with a steam counter. Same with the Big Bird. If this one is banned from boosting, you can also reload your Hyperdrivers. These are blue, so you can either pitch with them, block with them, or they get boosted away and you get some benefit from it, so that's kind of nice. I am running Magnetic Shockwaves. I never really played them though. I might end up cutting them and just putting the Teklovossen in the slot instead. Right now I have the Teklovossen in the sideboard because having Teklovossen on the field once in a while can be quite interesting. They don't really synergize with any of your other on-heads because they all ask you to put a 0 or 1 cost into the arena, but playing it out naturally off your Hyperdriver resources is also quite good in general. Some background noise, sorry, there's a ambulance driving through the street, so I will try to filter it out, but if you do hear it, I do apologize for that. So recharge is quite good. You get your resource back by just playing this. You put a steam counter on a Hyperdriver, so the 1 resource you spend on this, you get it back for sure. It's a +4 on your next boost card. +4 creates some very good breakpoints, because +4 on the 3 cost stuff like this turns this into a 7 cost, which means that the opponent would need to commit another resource, either an equipment or a good resource like a Singular, to be able to stop this on-hit effect. And for the most part, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this. Is there anything I missed? The Hyper Scrappers are quite cool, because as an additional cost to play this, you can banish X items from your graveyard. So this allows you to get rid of a bunch of your Hyperdrivers that you've already used that are now sitting in the graveyard doing nothing. And you pay this, you put them away, and then it says when this attacks it gets +X. If 3 or more Hyperdrivers were banished to play this, you gain 6 resources and this gets go again. So this can be a massive blowout, especially in the very, very late game where you're mostly drawing into blues and maybe a couple of reds. Like, you play this, you banish a bunch of your Hyperdrivers, you get a massive amount of resources back for that. Probably more resources than you would ever need, but this does allow you to then again come in with a boost card, boost something away, activate your Max to create something, crank it, coming in with the Banksy at the end of the turn or something like that. So I do I really like the Hyper Scrapper. It's a very fun card. It's like 6 is just too many resources. At that point in the game, you don't really have anything to spend 6 resources on. Like, if this had given 3 resources, it would have been plenty. But I guess flavor-wise, it feels quite cool, right? To be like, okay, look at these massive amount of resources that I have available to me. I quite like it. I quite like it. This deck is thematically so well built, and yeah, I mean, we got to see how this is going to be performing in the meta, because for the most part I've been playing around with it. With the 2-card hand, you are generally generating the most value out of this, like a 2 or 3-card hand, so you do want to be blocking a little bit with a deck like this. You don't want to just go all out phase, because the more you can preserve your life total with a deck like this, the more that you can get these little value spikes here and there, until eventually you can maybe put a phase breaker on the field to get some additional value and stuff like that. I'm only running the phase breakers, by the way, for those wondering, because these give +2 when you boost an attack. I was running the yellow one that gives a +1 attack to an existing attack action on instant speed, so you can kind of play around with giving +1 to something like an expedite, but I think these are probably just more value in the long term in the game, especially if you have too many hyperdrivers. Only running 2 though, because you cannot put these on top of each other, because they are missing the base keyword and at the lower right corner, and you do need to transform a base arms equipment in general, so not having the base on the card itself does stop it from being too good in multiples in decks. So I'm only running 2 of these, but I do like the Cockworks base arm, because this gives +1 to the next Mechanologist attack this turn and only costs 1, so I quite like. So you get +1 value from this, and then in the late game you still get like constant value from these Evo phase breakers, which can kind of snowball a bit, especially if you put multiple hyperdrivers on under here. You can sometimes get like 8 value out of a phase breaker, which is quite nice. Is there anything else I need to mention here? The sprockets, they are quite good because we run a lot of items, so sometimes the sprocket rocket can just spike you some extra value here and there. And other than that, I think that's it. I think that's all I wanted to say for today. Really fun deck. I think the way that this deck is right now, I'm going to be running it in paper as well. And let me know what you think. If you like this kind of decks and you want to get regular updates, you can check out my Patreon. I do update these decks there regularly. Patreon.com/GorganiGaming. And after some time, like after a couple of weeks, I will definitely do another deck tech video about this deck. But if you want regular updates, that's the place to be. And I will see you all soon with another deck tech. And thank you for watching, and have fun playing Max Hype Nitro if you end up building this deck. Bye bye.